Welcome to Behind the Line, where we pull back the curtain on the challenges facing first responders and frontline workers. The work you do is unique, and so are the stresses that go with it. Join me as we tackle key issues to reduce risks for burnout, and as we work to support you in doing the job you love without sacrificing being the kind of person you want to be. Hey there, and welcome back to Behind the Line. I'm your host, Lindsay Faas. If you're new to Behind the Line, what you should know about me is that I'm a clinical counselor specializing in trauma therapy. And after over a decade working with first responders and frontline workers around issues like burnout, compassion fatigue, PTSD, and related OSIs, I have become a passionate wellness advocate and educator for those who sacrifice so much for our communities out on the front lines. Behind the Line is a place for us to talk about the real life behind the scenes challenges facing you on the front lines. I created this podcast with the hope of bringing easy access to skills for wellness, allowing you to find greater sustainability both on the job and off. We are continuing in a series we are calling Normal People Problems, where we're tackling challenges that impact everyone, like nutrition, finances, home management, and parenting. But we're looking at the unique challenges faced by those on the front lines, along with tools to help you manage these areas a little easier. Today, I am joined by Yong Albert Ho. Sandy is a self-directed investor who successfully generated a six-figure stock market portfolio and owns several rental properties. As a TEDx and keynote speaker, she teaches female millennials how to invest in the stock market and real estate. With her award-winning book, The Money Master, Sandy has been featured in hundreds of media outlets, including CTV News, Global News, Forbes, The Globe and Mail, and Toronto Star. She is also a columnist for Money Sense, where she shares her personal finance expertise with young adults. Sandy proudly partners with CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. For every book purchase, she personally donates $2 to assist this charity with mental health research. Her vision is to help people feel comfortable conversing about money and mental health, as both can be sensitive subjects and have an impact on our daily lives. Albert Ho is a highly sought-after keynote speaker and speaks to hospitals, agencies, boards, and commissions about the healthcare staffing shortage in Canada and the US. He is a TEDx speaker and featured in Authority Magazine, Project Management International, and over a dozen media mentions. He's worked in numerous roles throughout his career, from medical secretary, personal support worker, registered nurse, and business owner. He currently supports complex multi-site projects as a project manager at a community hospital in Brampton, Ontario. Albert holds a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Toronto Metropolitan University. In addition, he completed his Master's of Business Administration from Vancouver Island University, along with a Master of Science in International Management from the University of Hertfordshire. He remains a member of the Canadian College of Healthcare Leaders and has achieved the Certified Health Executive designation. I'm delighted to have them both on today to share their insights. And I want to let you guys know that if you jump over and find us on social media, we are doing a book giveaway of each of their books. So I have 2 of Sandy's books, 2 of Albert's books. They are all autographed with inscriptions inside, and I am so excited to be able to offer those as a giveaway. So go jump onto social media, find me over at Lindsay Faas on Facebook and Instagram, and jump in on this chance to win a great book. For now, let's jump in. Welcome, Sandy and Albert. I'm so glad to have you here on Behind the Line. I'm really excited for us to get to talk about this topic. It's actually, so talking about money has been a thing I personally have been working on more in my own life. And I was really excited to get to try to bridge into this topic a little bit more. And Sandy, when I found out about your work, I was so thrilled. And then Sandy, you were so great to say, oh, and my husband is in this profession. Like, he probably has a bit of a unique perspective in on this. And I'm so excited to get to speak with both of you.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay, for inviting us on. We're really excited to be able to share our personal finance and healthcare experience with
Hmm.
you today.
Yeah, so looking forward to telling you a few interesting stories, I guess.
Yeah, I bet that there are some. So, why don't we start with a little bit about your guys' background? Tell me about yourselves and what led you into the work that you're doing.
Sure, I guess I'll start off first.
Yeah.
For me, I graduated from university with a business degree about a decade ago. And so I knew that for me, when this happened during the 2009 economic recession.
Oh, good
um,
timing.
Yeah, perfect timing. It was really hard to find a job, but luckily I, landed my first job event planning in the hospitality industry, and I knew that as a young adult I needed to save up for life's milestones, like saving up for a car, a house, my dream wedding,
Mm,
going on vacation, and eventually retiring. And so I had started working and saving money, and I decided to to one of the big banks and put all my faith in one of the financial reps. And not long after, I ended up losing thousands of dollars from
Mhm.
high fee, high risk mutual funds. And so
yeah.
from that experience, I felt like I was being burned, and I really wanted to take matters into my own hands. And that's where I
Mm,
became a self directed investor. And I was able to earn a six-figure portfolio by the age of 27. But
wow.
even then, it felt like a really lonely journey because money has been a taboo subject. And so
Hmm.
it wasn't until I met my now husband where, we were part of Toastmasters and mastering our public speaking skills. And then we decided to both publish our own books, mine on
Hmm.
wealth and his is on health. And from there, that's when it opened up doors of opportunity to be able to have conversations about money. And not only that, I'm also really passionate about talking about mental health because I feel that both of them tie very close together in how we
Yeah.
have our, go about our everyday lives. And so, yeah, and that's how I've gotten here so far.
Mhm.
That's a fantastic story. Thanks, Sandy. And how about for you, Albert?
For me, I graduated from Toronto Metropolitan University here in Toronto, and I began my nursing career at Sunnybrook. So I worked on a general medicine and ICU unit for a couple of years. So obviously, lots of shift work there.
Hmm.
And then I kind of got tired of the shift work, so I was like, oh, let me try being a care coordinator. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I got approached by an old friend saying, oh, let's open up a CPAP business. I'm like, oh, sure, right? And so I ran that business for a couple of years, yeah, owning and operating a CPAP clinic. And so
Yeah.
currently I'm a project manager leading large and complex projects at a hospital in Brampton. And um, and then, as Sandy mentioned, after publishing my book, I started to get approached to speak to larger and larger groups. And I want to sort of share my experience on the front lines. And so now I'm a keynote speaker as well, speaking to hospitals mainly about nursing burnout, recruitment and retention, and
Hmm.
just trying to make a contribution to make the healthcare system better.
I feel like you must be in really high demand right now, given
Yeah.
some of the retention concerns we've seen in the last few years.
Yes, and let's just say that I've heard about um, healthcare challenges even before starting nursing school. That was actually one of the reasons why I got
Yeah.
into the profession. I was like, oh yeah, my parents were like, it seems like there's a lot of demand for nurses, and here we are with the same types of issues. Like, but it's a very complex issue. So it's not just as simple as opening up more spots, right? Mhm.
Yeah, totally. You're right. It is a really complex issue. It's actually really funny. So, when I reached out to Sandy, I had been directed towards Sandy by somebody else, and I didn't know about you, Albert, at all and
Mhm.
what you did. And
Uh-huh.
so, when Sandy came back and was like, hey, so also I'm married to this person who, and I read your bio and I was like, there's a person who does this? That's amazing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so to have you both on, I'm actually just really excited about this conversation. But I feel like, Albert, we probably need to reconnect somewhere down the road and have just a conversation about some of the staffing challenges that have been happening, because I think that's a piece clinically I'm hearing so much about.
Sure. Yeah.
And then in this role, for sure, get a lot of feedback about from followers on social media and emails from our audience and things like that.
But I think
So
today we'll keep
you and I will
more.
follow up.
Yeah, yeah. But we'll try and I'll try and put in as much as I can, but I'll try and keep that as a separate thing for the
Yeah.
future potentially.
We'll
Sure,
circle
sure.
back around. Perfect.
Mhm.
So Sandy, let's start with this. What are some of the challenges that you see in your work when you consider working with specifically first responders and frontline workers as it relates to their finances, financial literacy, and wealth building?
Yeah, so when it comes to this group of people, typically in Canada, we're seeing that these workers tend to be in very stable jobs, and they're part of a union. At least
Mm-hmm.
in Ontario, it seems to be that way. And so
Yeah.
they know, like, every year that they'll get a certain pay increase, and they can rely on it. And they have seniority and whatnot, and so that's really great. But being a frontline worker, they often have to put other people first, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to remind themselves that they also need to take care of their own well-being, right? Whether it's their health and their financial wellness as well. And
Yeah.
even as simple as, a couple of things, whether it's paying yourself first from every paycheck, meaning that whenever you get paid from your employer, whether bi-weekly, say on a Friday, that
Mm-hmm.
you automatically set aside a certain percentage of your paycheck and contribute it to your savings, or even an emergency savings fund. Because those are some of the basic things that they can do. Another tip is to invest into or contribute into your employer pension plan. So, for example, in Ontario, we have something called HOOP.
Yeah.
And so that way, you are making sure that you are setting yourself up financially for the future and in your retirement years.
Right.
And not only that, but assigning a beneficiary, to all of your accounts. So that way that, in the event that you pass away, that you have a say on who you want to, pass your estate and your investment
Mm-hmm.
accounts to. So just
Hmm.
those couple of things are will really help you in your situation, so that you won't feel, I guess, as financially stressed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Albert, I'm curious, as someone who's been in the position of being in shift work and public service
Mhm.
funded work, if you have your own kind of views on what it's like to try to manage finances,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
you're right, like most people are in jobs where they have a sense of, what they're going to be making next week, next year, even 3 years from now, depending on how long the collective agreement goes for.
Mhm.
um, and yet, one of the things I find with a lot of the clients I work with, as well as just people that I talk to, and I think this is true not specific to first responders, just people in general, but actually quite a lot with first responders, is that their finances feel quite reactive. So it
Mhm.
feels like they're always kind of working to solve the next problem as it comes and hits them, as opposed to feeling like they get to be as proactive with their finances as I think they would like to imagine being able to be. So I'm curious, Albert, what are your
Mhm.
experiences and perspectives on this?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't work with frontline workers in terms of their finances, but as someone that has done shift work as a registered nurse, I think the mindset at that time when I was younger was just sort of maximizing my shifts and my work hours. And just to share some of my experiences with that is that most hospitals, there's always that need for overtime shifts, right?
Totally.
Excuse me. So every week my manager would start to ask for volunteers around, let's say, 3 o'clock, saying, "Hey, well, who wants to work those overtime shifts?" So I would raise my hand because at that time, I didn't have a son, I didn't have any family to worry about, right? So I would just start
Hmm.
accepting these overtime shifts. So my 12-hour shift would become a 16-hour shift, right? And
Hmm.
so here I am. I wasn't planning to stay till 11:30 at night, and so I'm going to be hungry. I'm going to be tired, and the only reason why I would say yes to those shifts was because my manager asked. Right? We were maybe
Yeah.
short because someone was sick, something happened, so that someone on the night shift couldn't make it. But I never really thought about the impact that it had on my own health, my own family, because you know at that time I just kept saying yes, yes, I'll take these
Hmm.
overtime shifts. And in some ways, even I felt like I was becoming burned out. Right? I mean, for
Yeah.
normal people that don't work shift work, they would never imagine working like Christmas or New Year's. but frontline workers, this is normal to actually end up working one of these
Mm-hmm.
stat holidays, right? I mean, I think I've worked almost every single stat holiday at some point, and at that time you think, oh, I'm earning time and a half, right? So 1.5 times
Totally.
your hourly salary, which is a great temporary benefit. But then you start to see how it wrecks your sleep schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and your social life, right? Because I would end up missing social events, birthdays, and even weddings because I simply couldn't get the time off sometimes because it's not that easy to just take a shift off, right? So
Yeah.
my one tip would be just to not focus as much on maximizing the overtime, really try and have some work-life balance because you've only got one body, right? So you really got to take care of your
Mm-hmm.
body and your mind.
Well, and it is, I actually really like that you brought that up. And I love even the parameters you offered around it. Like at the time, I didn't have my son, or at the
Mm-hmm.
time, right? And I think it's one of the things that we do when we're younger and earlier in our careers where we're like, yeah, I'll just say yes to everything because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
cash is great. And that's my
Mm-hmm.
vacation this year, right? Like it makes
Yep.
a lot of sense at the time. And not to say that that doesn't still have like feasibility, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also this piece of we don't necessarily have awareness for how that's going to carry forward, right? Like I am creating a relationship to my work and to my employer that says you should be allowed to expect this of me because I've always said yes. And so
Mm-hmm.
then when I do get married and have a kid and I have this life I'm building, it becomes harder and harder to say no because I've always said yes. And
Mm-hmm.
it's harder and harder because the pressures, even from outside of us, are what do you mean no? Right? Like you've always said yes. So we always thought we could rely on you forever and ever and ever because you've always been
Mm-hmm.
reliable. Right. And so it's hard because it's shaping in this moment a future that becomes harder and harder to set new boundaries and parameters around for ourselves. And so there is, I think, value in trying to structure that early, knowing that I can still pick up, some overtime shifts to help pay for that thing that broke at my house or the
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but that I maybe shouldn't be saying yes to all of the things just because right this second I'm in a situation where I can. It doesn't necessarily mean I should.
Mm-hmm. And would you believe that some provinces like Quebec, they actually have mandatory overtime, which is something I've recently
So
learned
does
about. And
BC right now.
they do.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So
Yeah.
these are small, like Ontario, it's kind of like optional overtime, right? They ask workers, and it's kind of like by seniority in some ways, but I can always choose to say no. But
Yeah.
at that time, I just felt like I was getting asked all the time. So if you're in a province that does have mandatory overtime, that means you actually have to work the extra
Mm-hmm.
4 hours, right? So, and
Yeah.
that's something that it's kind of like a systemic issue because your union is obviously agreeing to this in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like with their approval, they're kind of allowing their workforce to become burned out, right? So I know that
Totally.
Quebec is actually looking to remove that mandatory overtime piece potentially. There's been calls
Mm-hmm.
for it because some nurses are leaving the profession for good, right? And that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons that they'll say.
Yeah. I don't know if it's happening in nursing specifically here. I know it's happened with dispatch
Mm,
quite a bit where there's forced overtime. I want to say also with paramedics to some extent. And it's simply because of staffing shortages that they otherwise don't have sufficient staff. And it's so complicated, right? Like
mm-hmm.
it's a much more complex issue. Yeah. Okay. So Sandy, I'm going to come back to you. How do you find it different talking about finances with someone who is a first responder or frontline worker as opposed to more general populations?
Hmm. Yeah, so I would say that when you are a frontline worker, as Albert had mentioned, that
Mm-hmm.
um, with working overtime and getting burnt out, a lot of people are leaving the industry, and so
Yeah.
here we know that it is a very high demand job, and so people who go into the industry know that they're in much need, and if they want to stay in the position, they're pretty much guaranteed, right? And
Yeah.
so knowing that they'll have that income, but nowadays, in the past year, we've seen the rising interest rates from the Bank of Canada, the cost of living, even as simple as buying groceries, gas, like everything, just cost of living has gone up. And so, really, it's hurting the wallets of Canadian households.
Yeah.
And what I'd say to that is that it's, good to think about different ways you can diversify your income streams. So, not
Mm,
just relying only on your employer or full time work, but think of ways that maybe use your talents where maybe you can have a part-time part-time job, or
mm,
even for us, we have 7 income streams, from our full-time jobs to rental income to investing in the stock market, speaking
mhm.
gigs, book sales, brand
Yeah.
partnerships, and the list goes on. So for us, like, we've really thought about ways that we can um, monetize on our strengths and our talents. And
Yeah.
that way we aren't solely relying on one source of income, and it provides a safety net for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way for frontline workers and first line responders to also think about that as well.
I like that piece. I know we did a series a while back that we called the Escape Hatch series,
Hmm.
and it was all about this idea of having a way out. Because I think one of the real challenges is some people burn out really hard in this work, but don't actually have a fallback plan. Like they intended on doing this for 30 plus years and then retiring and living their best life after that. And the challenge is, I think more and more people are seeing that that's not sustainable, and are worried that they're not going to get to the retirement because of how much they are killing themselves just to get through any given day of the week. And so I think that having the concept of like a side hustle, or right, like something that you can use that parallels your full-time income. Particularly, I think we had a conversation with one person who talked about, like, particularly he was a firefighter. So he's like, I work 4 on, 4 off. And in my 4 off, I can do something. So he's like, I've
Mhm.
taken like construction jobs, and I've done landscaping work, and I've done these things because they're a great way to just occupy my time. And they work like a different part of my brain, and they let me let off steam from my firefighting job and let me like channel that into other things so that I don't feel like it's just stuck in my body as much, right? And so I do think that we can choose kind of side pieces that bring us life and that feel fulfilling in different ways that help counterbalance the work as well as help pad the income a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, I definitely
Albert, do you have
agree.
anything? Yeah, Albert, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, just to share, even from my personal experience about relying on a single income source, I still remember when I first graduated. Here I am, starting my first job, and my managers were relying on me to be there every day. But
Mm-hmm.
one morning, I actually had like sort of stabbing stomach pain. I was like, "Oh, this is really weird." And I ended up going to the
Mm,
hospital, and I ended up missing a couple of shifts. Turns out I had some stomach ulcers, but even those couple of, I guess, shifts, um, it made me realize if you are relying on a single income stream, something could happen to you, right? That's why we have, for, let's say, accidental death and benefits, like, though it's very real that you may not be able to go into work, and then I did actually lose some income, right? So that really was a
mm-hmm.
hard lesson for me to start to think about real estate. My parents were already into real estate, so I started to consider that as well. Another thing to definitely mention is that even government policies impact our income directly, right? So you mentioned the collective
Yeah.
bargaining agreement. So for the most part, it sets sort of those annual increases, and the more time that you're working with that union, you're kind of guaranteed that wage increase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Ontario, they introduced just a couple of years ago something called Bill 124. I don't know if has anyone ever mentioned it yet
No.
to you. Okay, it is specifically wage restraint legislation. So inflation
Okay.
is actually at an all-time high, right? I think it's like 6%,
Mm-hmm.
8% per year. That's how much the cost of things is rising. But this legislation was actually sort of pushed through and passed that limited the wages of healthcare workers. There's actually a bunch of different healthcare workers that are profession. There's actually, I think, 100,000 workers that are impacted, and it
Okay.
limited their wage increase annually to only 1%. So you could see that many
Right.
healthcare
You're
workers were.
losing against inflation.
Yes, yep. And there's actually 33 unions that were involved. We actually took the provincial government to court to say, hey, this legislation actually overrides the collective bargaining agreement, and actually struck down the bill. But then our government is actually going to appeal that decision, right? So they were saying, oh, this is like, we need to sort of, there's like financial reasons um, to impose that bill, like, saying that the provinces, the finances of the province are in jeopardy to save money. But it's it's all just optics, right? And literally workers are leaving the profession because of this, right? Because we were expecting to get a certain wage increase, and now you're saying it's limited to only 1% a year. So there were literally protests, on the media. Many of the provincial unions have been talking about it for several years now, maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
But it's an ongoing fight when legislation is actually limiting, literally, limiting our wages, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so definitely, even just look it up, Bill 124, and there's lots of coverage about this particular issue.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that there's a lot of pieces that have impact, right? Like I know here in BC, paramedics are one of my saddest but favorite examples, right? Like part-time medics and how their pay scaling works is just a disaster over here. I don't understand why anyone does it. Because it feels very not worth it. Like if you have a shift where you're not called out, you're like paid $13 for the shift or something. It's crazy. And so like you're just like, how are people supposed to survive on that? I know I've also worked with people who are in corrections, and there was a significant screw up in some of the systems that tracked some of their overtime for a number of years. And so there are still officers who have gone years without seeing pay for a huge chunk of their overtime that stretched over like a number of years. And that still hasn't been sorted and fixed, even though years and years have gone by since that problem happened. And many of them are just going like, I just expect I'll never see it. And you're like, right, like that's just time you've given away for free to an employer, trusting that you're going to get what you've earned at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, you kind of just get a big middle finger. And that's hard, right? Like it's hard when you're there doing really hard work and the work is not just a job, right? Like for very few people who enter this kind of work, it doesn't feel like just a job. It's not just a paycheck. It is like a passion work. It is a heart work. It is something we come into with some amount of our identity kind of raveled into it. And so it is really hard to feel like it's discounted or not sufficiently valued in a way that feels more tangible. Yeah. Okay. I feel like we could go on with that for a really long time, you guys. There's so many examples. I know. Let's go this direction. Knowing that there are, lots of different challenges, even in terms of things like wage restriction, and pieces like this that are going on around us, aside from the, multiple income stream piece, because I love that tip. What are some of the key pieces that first responders and frontline workers should be aware of and keep in mind when it comes to their finances? And what are some of the like tips and tricks you can offer that you might suggest to those who are serving on the front lines to support their financial literacy skills and growing their wealth?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that first. So, now that we are parents, I kind of just wanted to touch base on, those who are working parents, because that's kind of what we're going through right now. And,
Yeah.
for those who have young kids, we know that one of the most expensive costs is, signing up for daycare, childcare, and to help with lessening the financial burden. I think within the past year, all of the provinces and territories have signed on to the National Child Care Program, where I believe by 2025,
Okay.
it should reach $10 a day for daycare,
Okay.
which is really great. And so when we look back at 2022, parents would be provided a 25% reimbursement from April
Mm-hmm.
onwards. For 2023, it's 50% reimbursement. And then again, they're working towards $10 a day eventually. And
Okay.
so, I mean, it's not a perfect system. Of course, there's a lot of kinks to be figured out with that. And some provinces are
Mm-hmm.
ahead of schedule, some are on track, and some are behind.
Sure.
Most likely, the smaller regions are able to kind of roll it out a bit faster, whereas
Mm-hmm.
BC and Ontario, we've got such a huge population and many
Totally.
facilities to look after, so it will take some
Yeah.
time. But the good news is that from the Government of Canada website, it says that if you live in say BC or Ontario, families will save on average more than $9,000 annually,
Wow.
compared to what they're paying today,
Yeah.
which really helps, especially in our inflationary times. And
Totally.
with that, um, now that working parents can expect this type of money back, going forward, um, it's key to really think about how you're going to now, like something you've earmarked for daycare,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get some money back from the government. Um, what are you going to do with that money now, right? Because it
Yeah.
kind of frees it up. And so some things to consider are, would you put money towards your children's future education, such as the RESP, or the Registered Education Savings Plan?
Mm-hmm.
Another option is to work towards paying off debt,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you are a homeowner and
Right.
you may have a big chunk of your mortgage, and if you are on a variable rate mortgage, your
Right
payments have gone up
now.
and up and up, right?
Yes.
So you may want to put in, say, a lump sum, depending on what
Mm-hmm.
your mortgage contract is, and the timing. It may work out, or try to um, increase the frequency of your mortgage payments somehow, just to kind of reduce the debt. Or even those who have credit card debt as
Mm-hmm.
well, is very common, just to kind of help, just pay down that
Bring that
debt,
down.
which
Yeah.
would alleviate those financial pressures as well. And so, um, or even just work towards any other kind of savings goals that you have. Maybe you want to go on a family vacation, because during the
Mm.
last few years of the pandemic, we haven't been able to travel. So, at least for our family, we're hoping to take a Disney cruise next
Yeah.
year. So that's kind of one of our goals that we're working towards. So, yeah.
Totally. I love it. Well, I think that's a really great set of tips. And I think it's funny. Um I've been following this pair of women who talk about investing for women on social media. And one of the things that they talk about is, if I can't manage $1,000, I can't manage $10,000. Right. So I think hilarity of humanity is we have this tendency to spend what we make, no matter how much more we make. And we keep thinking, well, if I just make more, I'll be like, then I'll be able to save, and then I'll be able to invest, and then I'll be able to do these things. And to some extent, there is probably like a turning point where that becomes more true. But we find a way to fill our lifestyle to spend every penny we have if we have it. And so if we're not thinking about it, that $9,000 a year I might save on childcare, when that finally comes to exist and be in fruition, I'm just going to spend that somewhere else. Right. And so to be able to be forward thinking about that and go, okay, so that's coming. And when it comes, what do I want to do with it? And how do I be strategic with it? Which is, it kind of circles us back to this piece I said before, that one of the things I find about a lot of people, but specifically quite a lot of people who are in this kind of work, is that financially they tend to be quite reactive. They're always catching up to the last problem they had to solve, right? So like the roof is leaking. Now I have to work a bunch of extra overtime to pay down the line of credit I had to take out to cover that cost, rather than having thought, oh, I probably should have like an emergency home expenses savings account that I put like $50 into every month. And then at least like it may not have covered the whole roof, but it might have covered half. And then I would have to work half as many overtime shifts to help make this up later, right? And if I had put that into like a TFSA or like a something that I can pull it back out of, but it's earning something while it's sitting there, maybe I'd be a little further ahead than if I hadn't saved for it at all, or if I had saved for it into an account that makes nothing on it, right? And so it's this piece about kind of getting proactive and being aware and intentional with our financial choices.
Behind the Line is sponsored by Beating the Breaking Point. Beating the Breaking Point is a 7-part online training program designed specifically for first responders and frontline workers, and tailored to fill the gaps in your training to support resilience and sustainability. Whether you're new to the work and wanting to cultivate tools to prevent burnout, compassion fatigue, and related concerns, or you are deep into your years on the job and have gone a few rounds with burnout and other mental health challenges, this program offers the foundational pieces you need to support personal and professional wellness for the long haul. You are a helper. You love your work and you sacrifice a lot. Investing in you and your sustainability is the best gift you can give yourself and those who lean on you. We make this program as risk-free as possible by offering a limited money-back guarantee to ensure that it's a fit for you. If you enjoy Behind the Line, you are going to love this program. Google Beating the Breaking Point Lindsay and find everything you need to get started, or use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's it's a great opportunity to kind of have that mindset shift and think about what you anticipate will happen. So then that way you can work towards it. And so that when it does happen, it's doesn't feel like such a big burden.
And I guess I should add that, my biggest tip is actually to have a household monthly and annual budget. I mean, if you're a manager at any department, you have to manage budgets already. And to your point about if you don't even budget your money now, you will actually end up spending everything. So, I mean, the 3 biggest costs for every household are going to be housing, transportation, and food. So even if you can track those and then start to actually see how much is left over so you can have a savings rate, that's going to be a huge win, because you can actually start to plan for the future. And even to mention a previous, a personal example for us is we're starting to look at getting rid of our gas-powered car. And so with the environment, concerns, the price of gasoline, right? The price of gasoline is guaranteed to rise forever. I don't know if people, if this is news to anyone, but once we started,
I don't think anyone's holding out hope that it's going back down to 27 cents a liter anytime soon.
and the government is banking on that, right? There is actually policies that the tax that's in gasoline is it's an elevator. Every year it's going to go higher and higher.
Yeah.
So because the whole point is to get rid of the gas powered cars, to think about hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles, right? So we test drove a couple of electric vehicles, and even for us, we've already committed to getting like a RAV4 hybrid as our next vehicle, because once we saw gas prices hitting $2 a liter, we're like, hey, maybe we should start to rethink this, especially for people that drive, import cars like BMWs, Mercedes. They have premium gas, right? Or like, imagine having to pay a premium just to drive the exact same car. So, switching to an electric vehicle will actually save $1,800 to $2,500. Right. So these are huge savings that every one of your listeners should definitely be thinking about. Because and just by switching the car, then you're automatically sort of getting those savings.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think one of the things I've had to teach myself about budgeting, I had a family who did not do money well. That was not my early learning. And I think my takeaway from that was I really wanted to do it different than they did. but without knowing any tools to figure that out. And so a lot of it has been like learning on the fly and learning from mistakes and figuring it out as you go. I always wrestled with budgeting because it felt like work. I love that there's really great tools now that make it less work. Like I remember when I started doing it, it was like an Excel spreadsheet and there was like a lot of effort into the tracking and the monitoring. I love that now there's things that just like sync to your bank account and tell you where you spent things. That's magical. But with that, I think one of the mindset shifts I've really enjoyed and our family has really enjoyed is it almost lets you gamify it. So my husband does all of our grocery shopping. And he is a bit impulsive in how he grocery shops because he's like, oh, that looks yummy and I'm hungry. And so throw that in. And so I have been like, okay, here's the thing. Our grocery spending has been up here. I'm not cool with that number. Like looking at that number and knowing our family of 4 has eaten that much money worth of food grosses me out. I like double dare you to spend $50 less each time you're grocery shopping. And we're a highly competitive family. That's just true about us. And so he's like, dare taken, right? Like challenge accepted. And he goes out and he's like, okay, Lindsay said $50 less. And then he'll come home and he'll be like, I did it. Like he's like, so stick it to ya. Like, oh yeah, you like, it's so great that we can kind of like, instead of it being this punitive thing, like we have to buckle down, we have to contain it, we have to keep it small, where it feels restrictive, it feels like a dare, it feels like a game, it feels like something you get to win if you do it. And that makes it very differently kind of fun to participate in instead of feeling like this really crappy thing you're stuck with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
For us, I think we like to use PC Optimum points to kind of, I guess,
Yes.
gamify our shopping
Totally.
experience. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I know that like, so we just did a trip to Disney in November.
Oh, wow.
And this was one of my, like, you know, the commercial, the IKEA commercial where the woman's running out and she got such a good deal and she's yelling at her husband, start the car.
Yeah.
That's how this moment felt for me. I literally said it to my husband, start the car, as I clicked the like complete order button, because we had acquired so many air miles on our MasterCard. And it's like the fancy MasterCard that gets you like bonus miles on anything. So we always get gas at Shell because that gets us bonus miles. And we always shop at the places that get us bonus miles.
Mm-hmm.
And we had funded things like furnishing our offices using that credit card and very intentionally so that we could get the bonus miles. I got us like a trip for 4 people, flights, hotel for 9 days, and 5 days of park passes. All on points. I paid $1,200.
Wow.
And it was right. And I was like, start the car. How do you start the car? We're going to Disneyland. It's going to be great. And it was so much fun to be like, all we really paid for this trip was that $1,200 and food. And like the things we decided to bring home with us, which felt so fantastic.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I know. It helped that COVID was a thing and we spent money but didn't go anywhere. So that really helped us stockpile. But it's kind of cool to be like, oh, right. Like it doesn't have to feel constraining. It can feel kind of fun to feel like you're gaming the system. Like you're winning over this thing that's intended to make you feel like you're losing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, Albert, I know that you have to run.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need to go, thanks so much for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Sandy, I'm hoping that I can get like 2 more minutes with you.
Okay.
Because I would love for you to have a chance to share a little bit about your book. I know that I have a copy. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm really excited to dig into it for my own purposes. And I have copies of your book and Albert's book to offer as giveaways. So for those listening, connect on our social media and we'll be doing some giveaway pieces in the next little bit here. But I would love for you to share a little bit about some of what people could expect to find in your book and how that might be of value to the kind of population that we're speaking to today.
Yes, for sure. And I actually can stay on a bit longer, so
Perfect.
I'm not short on time.
You're not in a rush.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. But yeah, I can definitely mention my book and a bit about Albert's as well, if you're interested.
Mhm.
So first off, for mine, so my book is called The Money Master: Inside Secrets on How to Make Your Money Grow and Stay
Yeah.
Safe.
There it is. It's probably backwards in the camera.
And um, I focus on teaching female millennials on how they can build their wealth through three
Mm.
main pillars: through investing in the stock market, investing in real estate, and also through starting your own business. Because
Mhm.
those are the kind of the experiences I have, and I thought that it would be, those kind of the most common ways for people to build
Mhm.
wealth. And yeah, just going through like all my experiences and money mistakes, and so
Mhm.
just being able to kind of share that in writing, and to help um, my peers to kind of get their finances organized, and to feel like they're in
Yeah.
control, and to gain that confidence of handling their money. It's been a
Yeah.
really rewarding experience.
That's amazing. I mean, I think that there's so much value in helping people figure out how to get the most value out of their money, right? Like I think we forget
Hmm.
that money is a tool that we get to use,
Hmm.
right? Like it's not just this thing that comes and disappears from our lives. We get to choose how we utilize it. And so it's fantastic when there's people who can like skillfully help us understand how to utilize that tool more effectively.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And then do you want to share a little bit about Albert's book?
Sure. Yeah. So his is called
I have that one
Checkmate.
too. Hold on. This one.
Yes, how to win the sales game in healthcare. So for Albert, when he was mentioning earlier that he worked he partnered to open up a CPAP clinic
Yeah.
here in Toronto. So he learned all the different sales strategies to help gain clients and to grow his CPAP business. And
Mhm.
at the time when he was running it, he didn't have like a how-to guide, and
Yeah.
so he also kind of tried different methods, and he'd have to go speak with doctors and go into their physicians' offices and
Mhm.
make the pitches. And
Yeah.
so he has his hero method
Mm.
checklist, and he just talks about the different strategies and different um, audiences, because he also talks about how to sell to hospitals, and
Mm.
in different target demographics. And so
Yeah.
and his is
Mhm.
more healthcare focused. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I know he talks quite a lot about um like staff retention, and I think that's more in his keynote speaking potentially, but I loved some of the pieces in his bio around kind of recognizing the challenges being faced by healthcare at a systems level, and how that filters down into how we're staffing at the frontline level. And so I think that's a really unique kind of piece that he's bringing and sharing about with healthcare systems, is how do we treat our people better so that
Hmm.
they don't want to run for the hills so badly,
Hmm.
which feels very relevant right now.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
for him, working as a frontline nurse in several hospitals here in Toronto, he's had that experience of going through, working those day and night shifts, and working
Mhm.
overtime, and getting burnt out. And so and now as a project manager, he works on different all these critical projects, whether it's virtual urgent care. And so, um, for him, he has now kind of evolved his keynote presentation to talk
Mm.
more about how whether it's HR or executives or senior managers can help improve the employee culture, to make sure that their staff are taken care of and focus on their well-being, and different strategies to make sure that they are putting their frontline workers first. And whether it's better benefits or improved compensation. So he shares a lot about that in his talks.
That's awesome. Okay. Before we wrap up, I want to check in with you if there's any kind of parting thoughts, last pieces that we didn't get to touch on that you feel like would be valuable for the people that are listening.
For sure. Yeah. So I wanted to share 3 tips so that, for those who are listening and feel that, sometimes your schedules are just crazy busy and working crazy hours. There are several things that you can do to improve your financial situation that won't seem too daunting. So the first one is to, listen to podcasts like yours, but also ones that are specific to personal finance podcasts. And you can listen to it while you're driving to and from work, or even when you have your couple of days off, right? So it's just something easy to do. Like we have a Spotify subscription, so we're listening to podcasts all the time, whether it's in the car or at home. So there's that. And then my next tip is to think about ways you can automate your finances, and specifically automate your savings. So first off, when I talked about kind of paying yourself first, you can go into your online banking account and you can set up these automated transfers. You can set the frequency or like the amount of time you want to do that. And it's always adjustable if your life, situation changes, or you can't always make certain savings commitments. You can always adjust it. But I find that automating things makes it one less thing that you have to worry about. And when you're setting aside money towards your savings account, that way, you are balancing kind of what you are spending on your everyday needs, but also working towards your future goals, which is really important. And then also automating into with your employer if they do offer some kind of pension or maybe stock options, or any kind of employee matching program. Be sure to take advantage of that, because billions of dollars are being wasted every year by Canadians not taking advantage and opting into those programs where employers are literally offering free money on the table. So that's an easy way to do that. And my third tip is to take a course on personal finance. And one of my favorite ones, and it's a pretty popular one, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's the McGill University personal finance course.
Okay.
And so it's a free online course, and it has 8 modules. It's self-paced. I think it's mainly videos, but they've got I believe they have the transcript there. And after each module, there's a little quiz to test your knowledge. And then once you complete the 8 modules, you'll get a certificate. And then you can actually get a LinkedIn badge as well, and you can post it on your profile. So that one is a really great course because it covers a lot of good, like fundamental topics for personal finance, and it's free, right? So
I mean, that's great.
Yeah,
good one. I mean, I think I invested quite a lot into a course recently, actually. I've really enjoyed it, in part because it's not just like finance tools. It's also really grounded around how we build a relationship to money. And I've really appreciated that piece of it. It's by Dow Janes, and they are the ones I shared about earlier, who talk a lot about investing for women. And what I really liked is there was an entire module about healing your relationship with money. And it was all of these pieces about how our upbringing creates biases and associations to different pieces around how we think about money, and how many of those will tend to hold us back from believing that we are deserving of wealth, that we are inclined towards seeking out wealth. I found it super fascinating when I walked through some of the process, and I was like, oh, I did not know that's what I thought about that. But here we are. And now I have to kind of tangle with, is that really what I choose to want to think? And how do I change how I think about that kind of piece? Right. And that was just really interesting, because I think there's a lot of programs that give you a lot of the like strategic tools for how money works and how investing works and how to pay down your debt. And all of that is awesome. But I think if you don't, I mean, maybe this is therapist speaking, but if you don't heal some of the like root stuff that leads us to think about ourselves in relationship to money differently, we're likely to just re-engage the same patterns over and over again. So I've really liked that piece about how they talk about it. And I think it's just like a valuable piece to consider, regardless of whether you take their course or not. This really interesting piece around like, how do I relate to money? How was I trained to relate to money? And what do I think when I think about someone who's wealthy versus someone who I think is poor? And what are my associations to those things that I need to maybe like course correct for, so that I feel like I get to be someone who chooses to work towards wealth without feeling like, oh, that's for those people who I associate with these things, not for me. Even though I would really like the freedom that would afford me if I could have it.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's why in my book, the very first chapter that I talk about, it's called Developing a Millionaire Mindset. And I really wanted to touch upon, how people think about money, or even, whether their childhood upbringing and forgiving themselves of their money mistakes, because sometimes we just, feel so guilty or ashamed of money mistakes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I definitely wanted to talk about that right from the beginning, because if you don't have that right mindset, I think, for me, it was a lot of like scarcity mindset growing up. And so I had to like change that to an abundance mindset. And it's not like an overnight thing, but it takes time, right? To work on that. So
totally.
yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad that that's a piece in your book as well. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to read it yet, but I'm really excited to do it now. Yeah, I think one of the best tips that I have gotten out of the course I'm taking right now, that I want to add to your 3 tips, is one of the things they encourage is to have a weekly money date. And I've been doing it for the last 5 or 6 weeks now. It's my favorite night of the week. And I didn't think it would be. And like, they really encourage you to like set it up very self-carry. Like, for me, my choice is it's Friday nights. My husband goes out Friday nights. It's once my kids are in bed and he's gone, and I get to sit down with like a nice glass of wine and my laptop, and I go through and review what my spending has been that week and check that all of my transactions are listed in my online budgeting system. And I get to kind of go through and see where my savings are going and where my spending is going, and kind of that gamifying piece, like where am I winning and where am I losing, and need to challenge myself for next week or next month to try to make it better. Right. And it's been actually really liberating to get to go, I feel more in control of it when I know what's going on. Right. And so when we only interact with it like once every 2 weeks when we got our paycheck, or once a month when we have to pay the mortgage, it's like not enough touch points to really feel like you're on top of it and you're the one bossing it. It kind of feels like this thing where it's just like happening. Like stuff just comes out of that checking account. Stuff goes into the things. I don't know. Suddenly my credit card went from like $1,000 to $5,000. How did that happen? I don't know. Right. And so when it's weekly, it's been really interesting just to feel like I hold the reins instead of things just happening out from under me. And that feels really empowering.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, even for my husband and I, we both keep an eye on our online banking accounts, checking our credit card bills, keeping track of our mortgage payments as well, even our household budget, to our net worth calculations as well. So I mean, we make sure that we touch base every month. But individually, we're always keeping track of, at least on a weekly basis as well.
Yeah, totally. Okay, Sandy, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really lovely to get a chance to talk with you and to like bridge in some very tangible, real wisdom into something that I think a lot of people feel is really nebulous. And so I just really value what you do and what you're bringing. And thank you for taking the time to come on and chat with me.
Yeah, no, this has been fantastic. I feel like time just flew by so quickly.
I know. It does that, like I said. Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks again to Sandy and Albert for taking the time to join me today. Don't forget to check the links in the show notes if you want to learn more about their work, including their books, The Money Master, What They Don't Teach You About Wealth and Investing, and Checkmate, How to Win the Sales Game in Healthcare. Both of which you can win if you also click the link to jump over to either of my social media pages on Facebook or Instagram. Follow me there, find more information about how you can win a free copy of one of these great books. I also want to extend a big thank you to you, amazing listeners, for continuing to spend time with me here. If you value this podcast and want to help us in our mission to support frontline wellness, there are 3 ways you can do just that. Number 1, rate and review Behind the Line on Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening. Number 2, follow me on social media at Lindsay A. Faas and engage with me and this little amazing community that we're building there. Every time that you like, comment, and share our posts, you help us spread our message like wildfire, thanks to the magic of the algorithm. Number 3, share this resource or our other resources with those you know, whether that's forwarding our weekly newsletter on to your friends and coworkers, listening to the podcast as part of a team meeting, or using our burnout indicators checklist and triage guide as a staff-wide tool. Every little bit helps us take our mission to the next level and serve those who are sacrificing so much to serve our communities out on the front lines. Know that we can be found online on our website, on most major podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube. We make all of our resources available to you because the work you do matters. But more than that, you matter. And we want to make sure you have what you need to keep up the good work at work, as well as in your real life outside of work. So use it and share it. And until next time, stay safe.